MSNBC host Chris Hayes apologized to Bill O'Reilly. So let's watch, and then we'll discuss whether or not the apology is merited.
Of cable news that we do a lot of quoting of other broadcasting outlets, sometimes to make a narrative point, sometimes to make a political one, and sometimes just to make a joke. And the cardinal rule of this practice is to make sure when you clip someone else or quote them, you do it in proper context. And we failed to do that with a quote I attributed to Bill O'Reilly the other night. In a segment on the Confederate flag, I said that Bill O'Reilly said it represents the bravery of Confederates who fought in the Civil War. And while it's true, O'Reilly literally uttered the words, "it stands for bravery," while talking about the flag, it's also quite clear from the context of the discussion he was having, he was not giving his own views, but talking about how some other people view or understand the flag. We should not have attributed that view to him. Fair is fair. We got it wrong, and I apologize.
You know, MSNBC should just change their name to the Constant Apology Network. Has there ever been an MSNBC host in history who hasn't apologized for their existence, for breathing? I mean, Melissa Harris Perry, perfect example. She had somebody made a joke on her show about how one of Mitt Romney's kids is black, an adopted kid. It's somebody saying, like, one of these things is not like the other, and then the world blew up. Conservatives are racist. How's that racist? It's called a fucking joke. Get over yourself. But what did Melissa Harris Perry do? Instead of saying, it's a joke, breathe. We're not the people pushing for racist policies. Your side is. Sit down and shut the fuck up. She didn't do that. Of course not. That would take a backbone, and that would take actually believing fully in liberal principles. So what did she do? She was like, started crying. I live my life understanding that when people are offended, it's legitimate and we should respond kindly. Or not. Or you realize that they're fucking exploiting it for political reasons and they're not actually offended. How about that? How about that? She apologized to Martin Bashir after the thing about shitting in Sarah Palin's mouth. Maybe that one deserved a little bit of an apology. But there's countless examples. You guys know this. So look, on the one hand, I like Chris Hayes. I got nothing against Chris Hayes. I think he's a really smart guy. So on the one hand, I get it. He wants to be totally clear and get everything right for the record, and he believes in accuracy. Of course. I think that's why all the progressive hosts are in this game. I like to do my show for the sake of accuracy and facts and truth as well. So if I get something wrong, of course I want to correct it. Here's my issue with it, though. He gives the apology, but you're not giving the full context. You're giving the misimpression in people's minds that you were 100% wrong and he was 100% right, when that indeed is not true. So what's the problem with O'Reilly's bravery comment? You're right, he didn't say it. He said other people would say it's brave. But that's still dumb to say, and he should still be called out for saying that, as I mentioned on my show. Why? Because the only reason Bill O'Reilly, all of a sudden, when it comes to a Confederate terrorist, now he's calling balance. We need balance, 50-50. Let's discuss both sides of this issue. Why is he calling for balance? Why is he calling for a 50-50 view? Why is he calling for false neutrality and false equivalence? You want to know why? Because the person who did the terrorism is the cousin of his own ideology. So this guy's an ultra-conservative, big-time right-winger, learned his hate from the Council of Conservative Citizens, a right-wing group in South Carolina, a hate group, okay, neo-Confederate, uber-conservative. Bill O'Reilly is a conservative. Now, again, I'm not saying he's nearly as extreme as this guy. Of course he's not. Of course he's not, okay? But again, it's the cousin of his own ideology. So since it's related in one way or another to his ideology, all of a sudden, nuance, balance, let's look at both sides. The Confederate flag to some people represents this, represents something positive, represents bravery. Well, Bill, in what context would your argument be fine to make if you made the same argument when discussing all the other flags? But you don't do that. You've never discussed the Hamas flag, and you say, well, sure, to some it represents terrorism and anti-Semitism, but to others it represents fighting for the state of Palestine against the occupiers and standing up for what they view as right. It represents bravery to disaffected Sunnis and disaffected Palestinians. Did you give both sides? Did you give balance talking about the Hamas flag? Did you give balance talking about the flag of the Japanese Empire? They had to get rid of that flag, right? Why? Because they bombed Pearl Harbor, and they were our enemy in World War II. Did you say, hey, it's cool if an old Japanese guy flies it, because to him, it represents his father and his father's father and the history of what happened in his country. He's yearning for the old days when when Japan was a bigger player on the world stage. So you got to view it from both sides. You got to look at both sides. You know, the ISIS flag, of course, it represents terrorism to some, but you have to understand that, to some people, it's disaffected Sunnis fighting back against the evil Shias. It's bravery. That's what it is. The Nazi flag may mean terrorism and the Holocaust and the most vicious murderers and genocidal maniacs in history to you, but to old Germans who were raised in that context, you know, to them it represented the superior Aryan race, and it was the bravery of people to stand up and fight for that belief. No, but see, Bill, everybody thinks they're on the right side. Duh! But are they actually on the right side? That's your job. Your job is to say that, whether or not they are on the right side. But all of a sudden, when it's a terrorist that's your cousin's ideology, well, now nuance, balance, let's look at both sides. Let's not harp away here about how the Confederates are bad. Yes, that is what you should do. You should harp away about how ISIS is bad. You should harp away about how the Nazis are bad, because they are bad. It's true to say that. It's true to say the Confederates represented slavery and oppression and open racism and a terrible, terrible system of government. That is true to say that. You don't need balance in that conversation, because balance in that conversation would be false balance. It's not true balance. It's not like, well, the Confederates were right about some things, the Northerners were right about other things. Wrong. One side is right, one side is wrong. In World War II, one side was right, one side was wrong. This is not an open question, Bill. But all of a sudden, it's more complicated, and we need balance when it's a white supremacist Confederate terrorist. That's the problem, Chris, with him saying what he said. You're right. He didn't personally say that it's my view that it represents bravery, but even bringing up that some people think it represents bravery is as ridiculous as saying some people think the Nazi flag represents bravery. You should still call him out. And if you're going to do an apology, at least do an apology and then put it in context like I did, where you say it's still wrong for reasons X, Y, and Z. But you didn't do that. All you did was apologize and say, oh, I guess he's 100% right and I'm 100% wrong, leaving the misimpression that he was totally right not only about this issue, but that Bill O'Reilly still has this aura of respectability, like people should bow down to him. Nobody should fucking bow down to him. He is a proven liar. Story after story after story a few months ago broke where proven lie after proven lie. I was standing outside the door when a guy who was involved in the JFK situation killed himself. No, you weren't. We have a fucking phone call where you say, I'm going to hop on a plane and get there tomorrow, the day after. You're a liar. I saw nuns get shot in the back of the head in El Salvador. No, you didn't. You were there a year later, you fucking liar. You're given the misimpression that he's a respectable human being. He's not. He's the opposite of it. Don't bring yourself down to his level. And if you're going to give an apology, at least give an apology and then put it in context.